The Word of God told us a long time ago that friendship with the world is enmity to God. But in times of gray in a Christianized culture, a culture affected by the Bible, that part is good. It can seem that friendship with the world is kind of okay because everything is kind of okay. But when the grays disappear, it becomes starker and starker. You cannot be a friend of the world and a friend of God. You love the world, pray for the world, but you can't be a friend of the culture. You can't be saying yes. The middle is disappearing. And that explains something else. In the last 7 years, the numbers of those who identify as Christian in America has dropped by about 8%. In other words, over 1% every year. I mean, that's major because when you consider how long it took for Christianity to come in Rome to be Christianized, that's 1% every year. Less people identifying as Christian and more people identifying as no religion. What does that mean? Most of those who no longer identify as Christian were never truly Christian to begin with. Generally, they were nominal Christians. Most people who say they're Christians are nominal Christians. We know that. Just as many of we were, or you were when you were born, but you weren't born again yet. So really, for them to disappear, it's simply to reveal what was the case in the first place, which was no existence in God. That goes for the mainline denominational churches. They have been losing people at the fastest rate. While born-again evangelicals, for the most part, not lost much at all so far. Because what happens is the gray disappears. The middle disappears. The nominal disappears. The not real disappears. There are pastors who want to avoid the issues that get them in trouble or with the world. There are pastors because they know what it costs. There are megachurch pastors who seek to avoid any of these issues. One very famous one, and it's not about him, but spent much of an interview on television when pressed on the issue, said, I don't know. Well, the Bible is very clear, so why don't you know? But it's going to be harder and harder to avoid that. The grays are disappearing. It's going to force something. You can't, in the end, we can't avoid it. It's like being in an earthquake, and one side goes one, you cannot stay in the middle. Either the side of God or the side that's warring against God. The continuing polarization or decoupling, separating. This reveals something that happened with a recent Supreme Court ruling, which is threatening to bring this whole thing, this polarization, to a bigger level, where the government, not to mention much of culture, will divorce itself even more from faith and from Christianity and from Judeo-Christian foundation. For example, government agencies will more and more refuse to have anything to do with true Christians or true pastors or true churches because they don't agree with gay marriage and thus are to be condemned by the government as a hate group. So this is what it means. Government agencies will separate. It's like the polarization continues from Christian organizations. What does that mean? Another form of the gray disappearing. The darkness pulling away from the light. It means that government will become increasingly anti-Christian, non-Christian, because they won't allow for it, non-Christian, unchristian, anti-Christian, except by the hand of God. Thus will grow worse because they don't have the effect of the light on there in the culture. You understand? And that means untempered, the darkness being untempered by the faith, by the gospel, unrestrained persecution except for the hand of God and revival. But there's another side to the abolition of gray. And this revelation is even more crucial to us. And that is this. If the disappearance of gray means the dark or the black gets blacker, it means that the light must become brighter. That's what it means. If the removal of the gray makes the world darker from gray to black, then the removal of the gray must make us from gray to light, blinding white. The end times are not just about things getting darker. They're also about something else. The other side is, Matthew 24 speaks of evil increasing, love of many, also says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be proclaimed to all the world for a witness to the nations, and then the end will come. So it's not just darkness, it's the gospel being proclaimed everywhere. That's light. So the Spirit, so it says in Joel, and it will come about after these days, last days, I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall have visions. This is the Spirit poured out in the dark. Revelation 7:9 says, after this I beheld a great multitude which nobody could number, from all nations, tribes, peoples, tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palms in their hands. Who are they? These are all the people who were saved in the great tribulation. These are people being multitudes, not numbered, of salvation in the end times. Philippians 2 says, that you might be blameless and harmless, the children of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Daniel 12:3 speaks of the end. Daniel 12 speaks about the end times. Then it says, those who are wise shall shine as the brightness of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness shall shine as the stars forever. The end time's not just about darkness, it's about light. One of the signs of the church given in the Bible symbols is that of the menorah, the seven branch or the seven lampstand, which is what? It's the light that shines in the darkness, shines in the holy place, not the light outside, the light that shines contrary to the world. That's also, the menorah is also the symbol of the reborn nation of Israel. They adopted, it's the menorah, the light that shines in the darkness. On the flag of Israel is a Star of David. Star is a light that shines in the darkness. And Daniel says you are to be stars in the night. You see, if there's a disappearance of gray from the world, there must also be a disappearance of gray from the church. And if we're watching the disappearance of gray with regard to sin, then we're all getting worse, then we're also to watch the disappearance of a gray church, of a gray Christian. You understand? Of a gray faith. You see, when everything is, quote, Christian, I mean, that sounds good and there's a good to it. But then most likely that Christianity will be watered down, diluted. In many cases, even worldly, because it's like the paint. It gets spread throughout the black. When you have a Christian culture, you often have a cultural Christianity where people can be in it without really knowing God. But when that time ends and everything is not Christian, then you begin to have a real Christianity revealed more starkly without grays. It's not a bad thing. In fact, it can become the best thing. If the dark is separating from the light, then it must parallel the light separating from the dark. The world separating from Christianity is to parallel Christianity's separation from worldliness and the world. In fact, the very sin, not that we are to affect the world, but not be affected by it. The very same dynamic. If the paint in that can turns from gray, as gray starts coagulating, starts going from one side to the other, splitting, it means one will become totally dark, the other will become totally light. So the very same forces that separate this, that in the world, separating Christianity from the world, it will be separating the worldliness from the church. In Europe, you've had state and church.